Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Good, bad, crazy martinis for you today. And Jim, this isn't one of the formal martinis, but it's Election Day in the United States. You got to kind of imagine Bill Murray in Groundhog Day saying, well, it's Groundhog Day again, and it's that way for the election too. Today's the day that in the 50 states and the District of Columbia, the actual people you voted for, the electors, meet in their respective state capitals. I don't know where they meet, probably City Hall in D.C. or somewhere, and they formally vote out their electoral votes, which are then sent to Washington, opened on January 6th, as we all now know, and then that's what makes it official, and then inauguration on January 20th. So the results are obviously not going to change. Trump beat Kamala on November 5th. He's going to beat Kamala today. Then she gets to open them as vice president in the joint session on January 6th, then announce she lost again. And then she gets to watch Trump sworn in on January 20th. So not an easy road for a vanquished sitting president or vice president.
Yeah, you think probably more vice presidents would want to not run, considering the consequences are so much worse for them. Because, if you're Governor Dukakis, you didn't have to sit around watching, George H.W. Bush getting sworn in or something like that. Al Gore, Kamala Harris. Just actually, the more you think about it, this has been a rough road for a lot of vice presidents.
Yeah. And then the vice presidents who were still number 2 on the ticket but didn't win. Walter Mondale, Dan Quayle, Mike Pence 4 years ago. And then you got Nelson Rockefeller, who I'm sure everybody remembers doing the Electoral College count, got dumped from the ticket but still had to announce that Ford lost to Carter, and so maybe there was some.
I wonder if there's some advantage. He lost. Not with me. Can't blame me on that one.
That's right.
Maybe if he'd kept me, things would have turned out a little different.
That's right. Hey, until 2000, nobody even paid attention to this stuff, but now it's an event. But so today is the official Electoral College vote. But on to our good martini, and for that we go to politics north of the border, up in Canada, where Justin Trudeau is under fire, not only from conservatives, where he's always under fire, but also members of his own party and coalition partners, given the parliamentary system up there in Canada. You may remember Chrystia Freeland. Chrystia Freeland was the finance minister and the deputy prime minister. She became famous for freezing people's bank accounts for supporting the truckers' protest in Ottawa during those protests a couple years ago. So she's a real peach, but she has decided to resign because Justin Trudeau asked her to step down as finance minister and take another position in the cabinet. So she says, well, you lost confidence in me. I'm out of here. The real reason is because I think she sees Trudeau's time and power circling the drain. The housing minister has resigned as well. Yesterday, the leader of the National Democrat Party, a guy named Jagmeet Singh, also called on Justin Trudeau to resign.
Canadians literally cannot afford the groceries they need. They can't afford to find a home to call their own. And now Trump, buddies of the conservatives, MAGA conservatives love this guy, Trump is threatening hundreds of thousands of jobs in Canada. And the Prime Minister is more focused on himself, on infighting. The Prime Minister cannot remain in that position. Will he resign?
But however, Singh will not call for a new election. The Conservatives say that's because Singh wants a guaranteed spot in power so he can collect a pension as of next year. The Conservative Party leader is a guy named Pierre Poilievre. And if you've ever seen him on social media, you know he's quite articulate in expanding on the conservative position. He had one video where he's casually eating an apple and eviscerating the premises of a liberal reporter. Here's his explanation of what's going on right now.
Mr. Speaker, the NDP leader is absolutely right. This cannot continue. This Prime Minister cannot go on like this. Housing costs have doubled. Food bank use has doubled. The debt has doubled. Gun crime has doubled. And now we face troubling tariff threats from a president who can see weakness coming from a mile away. The Prime Minister must leave this job, but there's only one person who can remove him, and that's the leader of the NDP. Yes. Will he put the country ahead of his pension and vote for a carbon tax election now.
So, Jim, if you're keeping score at home, it seems like a 25% tariff threat suddenly convinced Mexico to find their big stash of fentanyl the other week there. And now the threat, which drew Trudeau down to Mar-a-Lago and so forth, has got Canada in such disarray that their own Liberal government, which we want to see fold, is very much on the brink of that.
Yeah. So for those of us who pay attention to Canadian politics, both of us, Justin Trudeau has always kind of stuck in our craw. I mean, for a long time, he was perceived as this pretty boy Nepo baby. And now there's some speculation that, in fact, it's not his connections to Pierre Trudeau that got him where he was. It was some other world leader down in Cuba. But as you're playing those audio clips, Greg, I'm just observing. Look, I'm proud of the American system. I think we have the best system in the world. I look at other parliamentary systems and how frequently governments and coalition governments, they can fall apart at a moment's notice. But I will admit, I do love hearing the grumbles and the cheers and the jeers in the background. You've ever seen questions with the Prime Minister over in the UK? The right honorable gentleman. It is... we hear a lot of congressional speeches, and most people tune them out. You get the feeling there'd be a bit more. One, if the President of the United States had to answer questions once a week, and then secondly, if they got to, or at least members of the executive branch. We kind of get this with hearings and stuff like that, but just kind of and it's never over. It's never a heckler's veto. It just kind of is background noise to that, which I think is terrific. Pierre Poilievre, one cool customer. I mean, first of all, I've seen the video of him eating the apple and just disputing and questioning and dismantling the premise of every question that the interviewer comes at him with. And without, his resting heart rate must be like 5. Seems like the kind of guy who takes Quaaludes as a stimulant. That's how cool and collected Poilievre is. And I was just thinking about Trudeau. This guy has been around as head of state in Canada for a long time. In 2015, so when Obama was president, was when Trudeau first came in there. So there's always this danger of wearing out your welcome. They don't quite have term limits the way we do. In fact, in a parliamentary system, there's a window you have to have elections in, but you basically don't have regularly scheduled, and they're much more abbreviated campaign seasons in a parliamentary system like Canada's has. Based for a variety of reasons. Economic concerns, Trudeau is definitely a man of the cultural left. Also, Canada, military-wise, not a huge help for Ukraine. They've done more in terms of economic assistance. You talk about military spending and meeting that NATO threshold. Canada's terrible at this, considering their size of their GDP and things like that. It really is unforgivable the degree to which the Trudeau government has, not maintained investments in Canada's national defense and military. On a whole bunch of fronts, it just feels like Canada is overdue for a change. And I just point out, so Trump goes into office. Obviously, Trudeau was a longtime critic of Trump, going back to the Trump's first term. And Trudeau goes down to Mar-a-Lago. I think this is the right decision. I think it is good. Trump is going to be in office for 4 years. So you might as well try to get along with him. You might as well try to find common ground. And obviously, right out of the bat, Trump says, I'm going to put in these new tariffs on both Canada and Mexico. And, I think Trump does this because he wants to see how everybody's going to react. Trudeau goes down to Mar-a-Lago. After that, Trump refers to him as the governor of the great state of Canada. I guess Trudeau had said, these tariffs would be devastating to our economy. And Trump says something like, well, we'll just make you a state. You'll be fine, right? I am sure if you're a proud Canadian, you don't like being talked about as a potential annexation target of the United States. And I'm sure you don't like, if you're a prime minister, the head of state, you don't like being referred to as a governor, right? Okay, I get that. Trudeau has a lot of ways you could respond to it. Morning Jolt a little while ago, I did a bunch of jokes about, we can't be a U.S. state, we don't have enough gun violence. Or without Toronto in a separate country, how would it possibly be a World Series? Canadians are known for the sense of humor. Instead, Trudeau goes out and gives a speech about a setback to women's rights because the U.S. has voted against women nominees for president twice with Harris and talks about, gives a whole pro-choice speech, which I think is a thumb in the eye. I think it's definitely Canadians are notoriously polite, but that's about as rude as Canadians can get towards Donald Trump. I don't think that works. I don't. Maybe it makes him feel good, makes the feminists in the audience that he's speaking to feels good, but I don't think it actually gets him anywhere with Trump. And I think there's kind of this, you're now banging your head against the wall. And what you see from those other members of parliament is like, hey, we need a way to convince Trump to not enact these tariffs now. The clock is ticking. He's supposed to take office January 20th. There's no time to waste on this. And look, we will see what happens. But it feels like, look, there's the formal loss of confidence in the government and the informal loss of confidence in the government. And I think we're seeing it accelerating way up north. Hey.
No, it's absolutely right. Canada's the cost of living has skyrocketed. They've put in these green policies. That's what Poilievre was talking about, a carbon election. The carbon tax there has been extremely unpopular and very detrimental to people's livelihoods. And so there's a mess there. Now, in the parliamentary system, I think there has to be an election by sometime mid to late next year in Canada. It obviously could be moved up. And so Poilievre wants there to be an election immediately and not have it hand off to some other Liberal prime minister if Trudeau resigns, and so that person could potentially be more popular, for example. So I don't know, but I think Justin Trudeau's days are certainly numbered as prime minister. Maybe he makes it into next year. We don't know. But given his blackface past, I know what his next political ambition is going to be: statewide office in Virginia.
Ah, that's very good. The other joke I had seen and I wanted to steal was the observation that if he does be forced to resign, it would be the second darkest day in Justin Trudeau's history.
Oh, if you haven't seen the pictures, folks, there's a lot of that. There was a lot of that came out a few years ago. He had a habit of doing that. But
blackface,
okay.
It's the new pickleball.
All right, let's talk about Omaha Steaks. We are just a week away from Christmas Eve now, and Omaha Steaks is a guaranteed hit for a gift for yourself, for a loved one, for a family member, for a good friend. Look, anyone is going to love Omaha Steaks. If they love steaks, if they love burgers, if they love chicken and seafood, great sides and desserts, you can't go wrong with Omaha Steaks. They will love it. They've been around since 1917. They know what they're doing, and they do it fantastically. Save 50% site-wide at omahasteaks.com during the Christmas gift buying season, plus get an extra $30 off with the promo code 3ML. We still have a few things left in our freezer from Omaha Steaks, but we've gone through a lot of it because it's so good. The steaks and the burgers can't be beat. And so I've talked many times about the great steaks and tender and flavor. The burgers, same way. Great stuff. And the steak cut fries, the desserts, it's all first rate. Visit omahasteaks.com and save 50% off site-wide during the Christmas gift buying season. Promo code 3ML. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with the promo code 3ML. Minimum purchase may apply. Well, Jim, we just touched on an ugly chapter in state politics, Commonwealth politics, where we live now in Virginia. But I, of course, as many listeners know, grew up in Michigan, which is mercifully in the last 2 years now of the Gretchen Whitmer governorship, but it's going to be an ugly 2 years. Thankfully, Michigan Republicans took back the state house in 2024, and right now the Democrats are trying to ram through a bunch of horrible stuff before they lose control of the state house. But now everyone looks to the 2026 governor's race. Whitmer is term limited. She's probably looking at 2028. In the little cabal of the democratically elected state officials there, Jocelyn Benson, the Secretary of State, is the choice of the Democratic Party for now to be their nominee. But a recent immigrant to the state of Michigan is also being rumored. He won't commit yet. And that person is former South Bend, Indiana mayor and current and mercifully outgoing transportation secretary, Pete Buttigieg. And there's really no more natural place for Pete Buttigieg to talk about these things than with Charlemagne on The Breakfast Club. And so Charlemagne also has a co-host there. And so here comes the discussion about whether Pete Buttigieg plans to run for Michigan governor in 26.
Speaking of concepts of the plan, you are saying that's what you have for your future, but you did move to Michigan in 2020. There is a term-limited governor.
Big Gretch.
Yes, Gretchen Whitmer, who is, of course, not running. And then there is a mayor of Detroit who's declared his gubernatorial run, but as an independent.
Yeah.
So...
Democrats want you to run for governor of Michigan.
No, but have you thought about running for governor?
I mean,
I was going to say, don't get a loss for words now.
The first time he didn't say anything. The first time he was lost to words.
I'm not here to make news on my future. I honestly haven't ruled anything in or out.
So we're taking that as a maybe?
You're going to, like I said, people are
I've never
putting
heard
ideas
him
in
do
my
that.
head.
That's more than a maybe. I know he just moved there, but, the Hillary Clinton precedent still stands. She literally moved to New York to run for the U.S. Senate prior to the 2000 election. And so Jim, I mean, Pete Buttigieg is 42 years old. His political ambition hasn't gone away, whether he's bracing for 28 and he knows it's an open seat and maybe he holds his powder till then, but that 4 years is a long time to kind of be off the radar. The Michigan governorship would be a pretty tough primary against Benson unless she were to clear the field, but I don't necessarily see that happening. So at a time when Trump is president, you think the Democrats might have a slight edge in winning that election. The idea of Pete Buttigieg for at least 4 years after Gretchen Whitmer for 8 years, not good.
Yeah, look, Mike, I don't expect an announcement from Buttigieg anytime soon. If anything, and if there's anything we've learned from his time as Secretary of Transportation, is that any announcement's probably going to be delayed, possibly even canceled, rerouted. There's going to be a lot of obstacles and all that stuff. So it's an interesting parallel between the talk and the buzz around Pete Buttigieg for governor of Michigan and continued reports, most recently in CNN, about Kamala Harris talking up running for governor of California. In both of these cases, neither one of them, maybe their legal residence is in these states. I know that Chasen, Buttigieg's husband, has roots back in, I believe it's Traverse City, and they bought a property there in 2020. So there's that connection. But let's face it, Buttigieg has spent the last 4 years living and sleeping in Washington, D.C., or traveling around the country as part of the job of Secretary of Transportation, or more likely sitting at an airport waiting for a connecting flight that's delayed because of the state of America's airports and all of that. First of all, if you don't want to run for office, you come out and you say, I don't want to run for office. And he didn't say that. So that's pretty clear. There's at least some potential interest there. What I'm marveling at in both of these cases, like as you mentioned, at least there is one declared candidate. Actually, in California, there's a bunch of declared candidates of people who have expressed interest in running for governor. These are folks who are generally state lawmakers, state members of the state legislature, people who have spent their careers working on state issues. Neither one of them is seeing it as a consolation prize, right? This idea of like, well, Pete Buttigieg, I just can't get my head around. I mean, you and I have both been in Virginia for quite some time. There are a lot of wonderful states in there. My parents live down in South Carolina. The idea of like, I'm going to move to South Carolina, and I think in 2 years I'm ready to run the place. That's a real high. And if you said, well, like, look, we own property. Oh, okay. Well, that changes everything. Now you're totally up to speed on all the problems in state government and all the different issues and all the different constituent groups. Like, there's something kind of absurd about well, I'm an ambitious politician and my time in this job is running out, so I need to do something else. It reminds me of, ironic considering who just won the most recent election, but thinking of the Tom Steyers, the Mike Bloombergs, the number of billionaires who say, America has been really good to me. I am so blessed. I've accumulated so much wealth. I have such a wonderful life. I feel a need to give back to my country. And the best way I can give back to my country is to run the place. And I'm going to run for president. And that's kind of what we've seen. And this idea of like, I really love the state of Michigan, therefore I'm going to run for governor. Well, how about you live there for a little while? Is that really too much to ask? Is that really, an unreasonable expectation? The point of a governor is not just to pick the most famous name you can. Ideally, you get somebody who actually knows how the state government works, the kind of problems it's facing right now. You've spent more time there than I have. But my entire experience in the state of Michigan is a connection through Detroit. And I got to tell you, as much as I give Buttigieg grief, that's a fine airport. Now, maybe it's because everyone's leaving. Maybe that's why they decided it had to be state of the art. But the neat little train taking you from terminal to terminal, very clean, very efficient. So if nothing, look, I know that even with RoboCop, they were not able to solve the crime problem. Axel Foley left to go to Beverly Hills, so you really haven't had the issue with crime, homelessness, poverty, and all that. But the airport is state of the art, so good for you, Detroit. Look, I don't like ambitious political career tourism, and that kind of is what this feels like. So I guess if Buttigieg wants this, he'll have to prove it in the primary. But it just kind of feels like you should live in a state for more than 20 minutes before you decide you want to be governor.
Seems like a good prerequisite. Yes, I love Michigan. I adore Michigan. I always love being back. If you haven't been there, especially in the summertime along the lake and Mackinac Island and then anywhere along Lake Michigan, Lake Huron shore, it's absolutely gorgeous. The UP, of course, is God's country across the Straits of Mackinac, where I'm from. And so I still consider it my home state. Virginia is where I currently live and have for more than half my life now. But nonetheless, when it comes to Michigan politics, Buttigieg will obviously get a lot of attention because he's a national name. Gretchen Whitmer got elected on, fixing the darn roads. Is Pete going to be fixed and build the darn bike paths? I don't know if that's going to resonate quite as much statewide. The other thing you got to get used to, though, Michigan, if you've been paying attention to Buttigieg over the last 4 years, is he won't do well, but he'll give you a really monotone academic explanation of why it was actually a really huge success, like spending $6-7 billion to get 6 or 7, not 1,000 or million, 6 or 7 EV chargers, but it was a smashing success. Yeah, get ready for that if you have any interest in seeing him advance politically.
You're going to get a very McKinsey-style presentation. There is an ancient Chinese proverb that the synonym for crisis is opportunity. And here, as your governor, I believe that your greatest crises are also your greatest opportunities, Michiganders. And some sort of like BS where, by just sending... it feels like a multi-level marketing presentation myself. But anyway, I'm sure. Dear McKinsey Consulting, please don't sue us. That kind of. Anyway, we'll see. We've know what we've gotten from Buttigieg. Judge him by his record, and once it gets here.
And it ain't good. I should quickly point out that Jocelyn Benson has not officially joined the governor's race yet. She is widely expected to. Michigan Republicans. If it's Buttigieg, if it's Benson, it's going to be a disaster. You've already suffered 8 years, or will, with Whitmer. Find somebody good to run. Hopefully we got some good candidates coming up there. And make sure they fill out their petitions correctly and actually get on the ballot, because that's been a problem as well. Not that I'm bitter about any of this stuff. But anyway, if you're thinking about running against Buttigieg, if you're thinking about running in the general election, trying to get the Republican nomination or what have you, but you're getting a little bit stressed over this, maybe a drink or two is in order, but take Z-Biotics first, because I can tell you, if you take Z-Biotics first, you're going to feel better than you would have otherwise the next morning.
Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. When you drink, the alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut, and it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that is to blame for your rough next morning. Z-Biotics pre-alcohol produces an enzyme that breaks this byproduct down. So just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, as I'm sure you always do, and you will feel your best the following morning.
Go to zbiotics.com/3ml to get 15% off your first order when you use 3ml at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantees, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they will refund your money, no questions asked. Visit zbiotics.com/3ml and use the code 3ml at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, Z-Biotics, for sponsoring this episode and our good times. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And this is meant to be reassuring, I think, for the most part. But there's always some concern about these things when it comes to the drones. Now, we've gotten more statements from government offices saying, well, this is a combination of commercial drones, personal drones, regular aircraft. Bottom line, nothing nefarious is going on. Other people have said, well, then why was there a classified briefing to House members yesterday? But nonetheless, there's still some concern. You mentioned in passing yesterday that there's been some folks worried that these are craft that can detect radiation or other things that could spot a potential dirty bomb or even a full-blown nuclear device that could have possibly been smuggled into the country. So, as always, you did more digging into this, both in terms of the likelihood of this happening. What did you find?
Yeah. So I don't know if this was the precise origin, but one where it kind of blew up was a TikTok video by John Ferguson. He's the CEO of Saxon Aerospace in Wichita, Kansas. And he's in the business of making drones. This company's a military contractor. And he begins by emphasizing this is his opinion. He says he hasn't run this by anybody. And he says if you think it's BS, that's cool, that he doesn't want to spread misinformation. So he begins with all appropriate caveats in place. So this is just his opinion of what is going on. As he goes on, he gets more and more specific and more insistent. He talks about Reagan dismantling the nuclear program of the Soviet Union in Russia. That actually was after Reagan. Reagan left office in January 1989. And yes, there was at the time of the breakup of the Soviet Union, Ukraine actually had the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world. All of that, as far as everybody knows, this is me talking, not him, was transferred back to Russia. Ukraine has no nuclear weapons. And I think there are a lot of ways to verify this. I think one big one would be that if they had nuclear weapons, they wouldn't be invaded right now. It'd be kind of big. Well, maybe like Russia would probably not want to invade a place that's got nukes to shoot back, right? Nonetheless, this guy Ferguson contends that 80 were lost. There's never been any reliable Western intelligence agency, U.S. intelligence agencies, international organizations. Nobody's ever had any track of that. But he believes he's spoken to someone who he will not identify, who has touched one of these warheads, and one of these warheads is on the way to the United States, and this is what's causing the panic, and this is what's causing all of these drones are involved in attempting to detect radiation. I would point out, and listeners to this podcast know, I am usually the last guy to ever give the Russian government any credit for anything. But when it comes to keeping track of their nuclear weapons, they've actually got a 100% success rate. And you think about it, ever since the end of the Cold War, like how many thrillers have been made about the fear of the Russians selling or losing or having a nuclear weapon stolen? Well, thankfully, when the U.S. have gone over to do inspections, it's been a little while since that's happened, granted. But the U.S. assessment is that actually the Russians are doing a better job of keeping their nuclear weapons under lock and key than we do. That for whatever else is going wrong in the Russian government, corruption, incompetence, et cetera, they take keeping track of their nuclear weapons very seriously. And obviously, Western intelligence agencies keep keeping track of the Russian nuclear arsenal very seriously. So there's no record that any of them have ever been lost, any of them have ever been stolen. When I say none of them have been lost, when I say the term broken arrow, Greg, my guess is you picture John Travolta walking in slow motion with that kind of Western doon, 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 running around the desert with the Howie Long chasing Christian Slater, right? This is a you knew this was all going to come back to a mid-90s action movie, right? On this podcast. Broken arrow is the term for a lost nuclear weapon. So apparently there have been 6 that have been lost and never recovered. And I hear people go, ah! Bunch of them are on submarines that have sunk. And so they're at the bottom of the ocean at depths that it's extraordinarily difficult. So you don't have to worry about some Bond villain going down with a submarine and recovering the nuclear weapons and bringing them up and using them or something like that. So this is this guy's theory. Joe Rogan tweeted it out, and it's definitely spreading on social media. We mentioned yesterday the gathering at the Army-Navy game. President-elect Trump, Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, House Speaker Johnson, Thune, probably next to the State of the Union, all kinds of military brass, leaders of Congress, all in one place. If there was a genuine fear that there was a lost nuclear warhead or a potential dirty bomb, it's very hard to believe the U.S. Secret Service saying, yeah, let's put all these guys in one location. Let's all gather in one room, a high-value target, lots of military personnel, all in one place. Because what's the worst that could happen? My assumption is that they would have either objected to it. And also, I have a hard time believing this would not leak in some form. A whole bunch of stuff leaks in our government. Everybody involved in this, they have families in New Jersey. You don't think they'd be saying, let's go visit Aunt Edna in Colorado this Christmas? You know, the sheer... When the Department of Energy has something called the Nuclear Emergency Search Team, the U.S. has procedures for looking for a potential nuclear threat that does not involve having drones only operate at night. By the way, if there are tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of lives at risk, and we're only going to use drones, only operating at night, don't look for the nuke during the day, guys. We can't do that. It might set off a panic or something like that. I am highly skeptical of this, and I feel pretty good saying, nah, this is not really what's going on over in New Jersey. I feel confident saying that because of all these reasons of likelihood it would, the behavior of the government would be different than what we're seeing now. And also, if I'm wrong and there is a nuclear bomb about to go off in the state of New Jersey, we have bigger problems than me being wrong.
With all due respect to Kristi Noem, maybe Jack Bauer for DHS secretary if this is happening. So
he only shot people in the knee and the occasional mountain lion, but only when his daughter was threatened.
Oh, man, I missed that.
If I worked for DHS, I would just run around and say, tell me where the bomb is on my phone every time, just to freak people out. I don't have time to explain. Chloe, open up a socket. Form a perimeter. Dang it, he got out of the perimeter. Again.
Love that show so much. Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Be sure to subscribe if you don't already. Thanks for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. They help us out a lot. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Tuesday and join us again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.